everybody. I'm Jean Sinzak. I'm the Associate Director at the Center for American Women in Politics. I also want to extend my welcome to you and thank you all for being here. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce the next speaker. I will just say by way of sort of welcoming and introductions, as Debbie mentioned in her welcome, COP has been working on the issue of appointments for decades. As part of this work, we have done a series of reports on the status of women's representation in appointed office. There are fact sheets that are in all of your folders that have some of the top lines and the links to the full reports, which I'm sure everybody's going to go home and read all the way through. As one of the people who authored those reports, we appreciate that. But for a quick background, some top line, none of this is going to surprise you, but we found most recently that women comprise 36% of all appointed officials on state boards and commissions. Of the subset of 53 of the highest level of state boards and commissions examined, 3 had no women members at all, and 10 had female representation under 15%. And if you can believe this is an improvement over what we found over the last several decades. Things are moving in the right direction, but we still have a lot of work to do. Critically, the data show that every demographic subgroup by race and gender in the state is underrepresented on boards and commissions except for white men, who are substantially overrepresented, holding 43% of all appointments while comprising 26% of the population. You can see the breakdowns again on the fact sheet, you can see the charts, you can see it on our website. But basically, the marked underrepresentation of most of the population signals that there's a critical need for appointing authorities to make an intentional effort to ensure that these boards represent the communities that they serve. So we are very grateful to Governor-elect Sherrill, who has made expanding representation a priority. As Debbie mentioned in our bipartisan Coalition for Women's Appointments project, we asked, as part of that project, we asked the major party nominees to commit to appointing more women to office. Governor-elect Sherrill was the only one who responded to our questionnaire this year, and she pledged that her cabinet will reflect the diversity of New Jersey and include representatives from communities and organizations across our state. And she noted that she is committed to expanding women's representation, including in positions in the front office and the transition, as well as appointments to key boards and commissions. So we are extremely grateful to Kellie Doucette, the Executive Director of the Governor-elect's transition team, and the newly announced Chief Operating Officer in the Office of the Governor. We're grateful she's here today, but her full bio is in your materials, but by way of introduction, Kellie Doucette spent much of her private sector career in finance and healthcare and has held senior leadership roles in government and nonprofit organizations. Most recently, she served as district director in Governor-elect Sherrill's congressional office, overseeing the operations of the district office, coordinating with the legislative team in DC, and managing the constituent and political outreach. In this role, she worked closely with local officials on a bipartisan basis to identify and address a wide variety of issues. She is recognized for her expertise in operational strategy and for her work building strong collaborative teams committed to effective and transparent governance. So welcome, Kellie.
Well, good morning, everybody. What a great way to start a Saturday morning to be here with all of you. It's just wonderful to be gathered with so many people who care about building a government that reflects New Jersey's communities and priorities. I want to thank the Women's Political Caucus and the Center for American Women in Politics for having me today, but more importantly, for holding this seminar this morning. One thing we've learned is that people don't step into leadership they can't see. That's true in elections, and I think it's especially true in appointed roles. Many residents don't realize how critical positions on boards and commissions are, or that these roles are open to them, but they are. And that's why conversations like this one this morning are so important. As you just heard from amazing experts, and thank you to all the women that are speaking on the panels today, in New Jersey, state boards and commissions help govern, regulate industries, and shape where resources go. They may not always make the headlines, but their work influences daily life. Some oversee professional licensing and standards, some guide major policy systems, and some direct significant public funding, as you already heard today. These bodies span nearly every sector: public health, economic development, environmental protection, consumer regulation, the arts, workforce training, disability rights, infrastructure, education, and so much more. Serving on a board or commission is one of the most direct ways residents can help ensure policy is carried out in ways that meet real needs, not just on paper, but in practice. New Jersey has hundreds of boards and commissions with thousands of seats statewide. That's a tremendous amount of real decision-making happening outside of elected office. At any given time, so many of these seats are open, which means there are real opportunities for new voices, new expertise, and new perspectives to serve, which is why it's so wonderful to see all of you gathered here, hearing and learning about all of this. Making it easier for residents to see what these opportunities are and how to step into them strengthens public service and broadens who gets to lead. When the pathway is clear and accessible, more people can bring their experience to the table. And we really hope that all of you in this room today will. You're getting such great information today from women who have deep experience with these opportunities. So I won't even try to repeat that here or replicate their great wisdom. But I do want to reinforce how important it is to Governor-elect Sherrill that these boards and commissions reflect the diversity of our state and include representatives from communities and organizations across New Jersey. So I want to take a brief minute here, if you'll let me, to briefly share my story, including how I got involved in government and politics in New Jersey. And I hope it will give you some insight into how I think about helping to build a team for Governor-elect Sherrill. And I feel like that is like one of the most important jobs we're doing right now during transition is really, I think of the overarching goal as being getting Governor-elect Sherrill and Lieutenant Governor-elect Caldwell ready for day one. And a huge part of that, right, is building their team. And so whether that is thinking about the folks who are going to be working on the appointments office or all the way up to the commissioners of different agencies, right, it's one of the most important aspects of the job that I have right now. So I come from a multiracial, multi-ethnic family. My mom was from England, my dad from India. We immigrated to the United States when I was 5 years old. After graduating from college, I spent close to 20 years in the private sector, doing work I enjoyed, but in hindsight, wasn't actually particularly passionate about. In 2016, unhappy with the trajectory of our national politics, I took a leap to get involved. Like many of you in the room today, to volunteer on campaigns for local government office in Chatham Township, where I lived. And I want to give a quick shout out here to Stacey Ewald, who's here, committee woman in Chatham Township, who actually asked me to run her campaign back in 2017, and is, a great example of women empowering other women and seeing them in a role, right, that they don't see themselves in. My story doesn't happen if it didn't start actually with Stacey. So this led me to managing a local campaign for Stacey, and in the process, meeting a newly launched congressional candidate named Mikey Sherrill. Hard to believe at the time. Really, nobody really knew who she was, right? She was just coming out and launching her campaign. One thing led to another, and in May 2018, at the age of 48, in a complete career 180, I was hired into my first paid political job on the senior staff of her initial congressional campaign. And that persistence, quiet persistence, polite persistence, right, is a great, I love that term. I'm going to borrow it. And I love the idea of, pairing it with patience as well. But it wasn't like this just happened overnight, right? I worked on a campaign. I went, volunteered on the congressional campaign initially, quietly put my head down, persistently did the work, and, over time was given this amazing opportunity. So to say this was an unexpected twist in my life is a huge understatement. I went from a career as an actuary, which for those of you who don't know, is universally considered one of the most predictable and introverted jobs, right, that you can have, to pretty much about as polar opposite a role as you could have. Suddenly, the only predictable thing about my day was its unpredictability. And I was completely new to the rough and tumble of New Jersey politics. not really clear that I belonged, right? Who points an actuary into the middle of New Jersey politics? So so for anyone, I also loved the messaging earlier of like, you are qualified, right? Like just because you bring a different perspective or different experience doesn't mean you can't do this work. My Twitter handle, and I am not kidding, and still is @KindlyKel. This, as you can imagine, caused my campaign colleagues, quite rightly, to laugh out loud. I was a little shell-shocked from being thrust into a world that I really wanted to feel like Parks and Recreation, but admittedly felt more often like Veep or maybe even The Sopranos. But through all of that, I could sense that I was supremely lucky. In the process, I found a career that I felt passionate about. I was given the opportunity to work towards something positive with people I admired, and eventually went on to take the role of district director in the 11th Congressional District. Doing that work for almost 6 years and learning along the way that I really preferred the governing part of this work. And now I'm very fortunate to have exciting new challenges ahead, opportunities that pull from my full professional background. And even though it can sometimes feel a little daunting, I'm awed by the great privilege that I have to do this work. And especially with the privilege I have to work alongside colleagues like Alex Ball, Mikey's Chief of Staff designee, Tim Lydon, her Chief Counsel designee, and Nabila Baptiste, the Lieutenant Governor-elect's Chief of Staff designee. So we're building an amazing team. My point here is that this story, my story, only happens with a Congresswoman and now Governor-elect who valued bringing new voices to the table and was willing to look in unconventional places for talent. As a result, the teams I've worked on for her have been diverse and have included strong women across the board in leadership positions. When we were filling out that questionnaire, I remember thinking, like, this doesn't feel like a stretch to say we're going to have strong women, in leadership. But I also want to pause here to say that this approach is not mutually exclusive to respecting the importance of institutional knowledge and deep experience. In my experience, the teams Mikey Sherrill builds balance both things, new voices with the proverbial gray hair. And you really do need both things, right? Like you need to have people who are thinking outside the box, and you need the people who really understand the institutional history as well about how things work and how you can best affect change. And I love that gray hair term. I'll say, especially I think in a room full of women will appreciate it. I quite often hear that and think, like, I really could be saving a lot of money at the hair salon, right? Not worrying about this, but the things only women have to worry about. Anyway, Governor-elect Sherrill understands that when you broaden the pool of talent you're looking to, making sure opportunities are shared broadly and transparently, you not only diversify your pool of talent, you strengthen it considerably. That's why an event like today is so valuable. I would love to hear more ideas about how we can make sure these opportunities are shared with a broader community. If we want more people to serve, we need to make it easier to see where they're needed. For everyone to understand the unique requirements that often exist so they can take steps to prepare. There are real opportunities across our boards and commissions, and making those openings clearer and more accessible is an important step toward inviting more residents in. Modernizing the portal, publishing vacancies, and proactively engaging communities and professions across the state are practical ways to deliver on that commitment, and things we will be assessing in the new administration. Representation isn't symbolic. It's about perspective, experience, and better decision-making. When voices are missing, so are the viewpoints that could lead to smarter, fairer, more innovative solutions. The work of government becomes stronger when the people shaping it understand the communities, industries, and challenges they're making decisions about. This approach to appointments isn't new to the team. It builds on the broader direction of the Sherrill Caldwell administration. It builds on the broader direction the Sherrill Caldwell administration has already charted. The transition has launched a local government advisory group with bipartisan representation from across the state. Thoughtfully convened diverse action teams with national and local expertise, and committed to broad public input through a survey that has already received close to 6,000 responses. In terms of filling positions across the administration at all levels, we launched a public resume portal within 48 hours of election night, receiving well over 4,000 resumes so far. All of this reflects a belief that decision-making should include many voices, not just during the transition, but over the long term. Expanding access to appointments is a natural and necessary part of that work. And that's where each of you comes in. By serving yourself or encouraging someone else to serve, the way Stacy encouraged me, you help make sure those voices are included and strengthen the leadership behind the work that matters most across the state. Thank you for being part of that effort and for helping more New Jersey voices take their place at the table.
Kellie is able to take some questions. We will eventually have audience mics, but if you could just really try to project and maybe you could repeat the question. So if, you know, when somebody asks.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Hi, Kellie. Eileen Keene from Monmouth County. And my question is, there are right now so many vacancies on so many of the state boards. Is the incoming administration talking to the Murphy administration? I do recall the last days, for example, of the Christie administration, he suddenly filled all the state boards. And obviously there were different parties involved. So my hope is that these vacancies are going to be left for the Sherrill campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the way Tara framed the kind of, for lack of a better, maybe say craziness of transition. It's, you know, controlled chaos, I get a little bit. There's obviously a lot going on, a lot of different work streams that we have going at the moment. And of course, you know, a focus on appointments is one of those, and making sure we're getting the right person into the position to do the work. I think today you're going to meet multiple people who have done that work in the past so capably, including, and that includes, you know, the folks in the Murphy administration now. So we will be taking information and learning from everybody and making sure we take the time to really inventory what's available, what's there, and how we can make sure we're pushing that information out. But, you know, of course, like I said, working with everybody across the board on that.
Hi, I'm Krista Rappaport from Montclair, New Jersey, Mikey's hometown, and I was at her first fundraiser. It's more of a request. When I asked our some committee leaders, how do I pursue commissions and boards? Today was clear, but his response was, you have to give more fundraisers. And yeah, seriously. And so I didn't believe it, quite honestly, you know, because I've been on a board in the past, but I think it would be great if you all could instruct committee leaders to give this real information, or the website, things like that.
Yeah. I'll just say, as I mentioned in my remarks, I have a real passion for the governing side of things, and I've been on, you know, then I still struggle a little bit with Gov-elect Sherrill, because I still want to call her Congresswoman Sherrill, with then Congresswoman Sherrill's, you know, district office, and I can assure you all of that official side work, and it'll be the same. It is the same on the transition and in the governor's office. Is completely separate from the campaign side, and everybody's resume, everything is considered equally. I'm a big, you know, believer in bipartisan work and collaboration. So we certainly will make sure that messaging gets out. And also, I think from my perspective, the things that I control here on the official side of the transition, making sure that we're getting out clear guidance about how people can very broadly apply for positions as well.
Thank you. I come from the insurance industry. I was AIG, I was the chief financial regulatory lawyer, so you know, it's no difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful.
Hi, my name is Erin Shafir. I'm from East Brunswick. I serve as chair of the East Brunswick Regional Council. You may or may not know this, but how many vacancies approximately are there on her team right now?
I actually don't know that right now, because we're in the process of doing a lot of that, you know, inventory work. And as you can imagine, we're looking at positions across the administration, including the boards and commissions. So I have a number of people on my team who are working on, you know, on inventorying and understanding all of that. But there's, as you know, as the team earlier mentioned, there are hundreds of boards and commissions, thousands of positions. The information isn't always up to date because it is moving so quickly. Again, that's not anybody's fault. It's moving so quickly, so it takes a little bit of time to do that inventory and really understand where those opportunities exist. But as we have that information and are able to push it out, we certainly will be.
And would that be available on the transition website?
It will depend on, I think there'll be different, it'll be sort of a rolling, I think, process, right? Because I think there'll be different places where we have more clarity before we do others. So some of it may not be before the transition is over, right? Some of that will go into the governing piece. So I don't want to make a promise that I can't keep there, as we're still taking it all in and figuring out the best ways to, understand and organize the information. Yeah, absolutely.
Hello. Hi, I'm Christine McGrath, elected councilwoman in Verona. So great to see you again. And fun fact, my husband's an actuary. So now we're connected. They're lovely people. Married 25 years. There were so many exciting things said during the campaign process for Governor-elect Sherrill. I love saying that too. What about some new boards and committees and task forces that may be coming down the pike based on things that were talked about in the campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question and definitely something we'll be looking to. I think the initial precursor to that, not to say that these will directly lead into boards and commissions, but I think the initial step in that was really thinking about our transition team and the external facing, what traditionally have been called policy committees, but we have called, in true Governor Sherrill, nomenclature, action teams. And those are, for people who don't know, committees of external stakeholders and leaders. We really wanted to take a new look at that, how that process worked. Quite often, and this is not just a New Jersey point, this is kind of across the country, those will tend to be very large committees that are focused around, particular maybe agencies, right, in the state, trying to understand issues that may come up. We decided with GovElect's leadership to make those more issue-based, right? So around, that's exactly to your point, right, around the agenda items that were important to her, because so many of those cross-cut agencies. And one of the things I'm most excited about the Chief Operating Officer role is a big focus of that is going to be helping facilitate communication across agencies to make sure that we're getting, when there's an issue area that comes up, we're getting all the right people around the table and helping make sure they work together. A lot of that happens already, but it's a little bit more on an ad hoc basis. So we wanted to set that tone from the beginning and have those action teams focused on there. So we have 10 action teams. They're on the website. They're all focused on different agenda items. And I think that just sort of signals this idea, again, which won't surprise anybody who's worked with the GovElect before, of really wanting to take like a practical, pragmatic approach to how you approach issues. And I can imagine that will continue as she starts to consider some of the different boards and commissions, that she'll be thinking about as well. So, yeah. I probably just have time for one or two more questions, so, yeah.
Hi, I don't know if I'm gonna need a mic or not. I'm Nancy Wolf, I live in Highland Park. Could you speak to the extent, I know there's some newbies in the room, there's some people who've been around for a bit. We have various levels of experience. Now, I don't know if it was covered in Chrissy's panel, but to what extent should people have references that would be germane to the position that they're applying for, or even political referrals? Is that a necessary element, or will everyone be created equal? Let me just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and again, some of these processes are things that we're still, diving into and developing, but as you heard in my remarks, I think there is really a willingness to focus on the fact that different kinds of experience, my story is an example of that, right? Different kinds of experience bring really important perspectives to bear. So I think balancing out, of course, we need to make sure that we are vetting people, right, and understand that their experience, right? So letters of reference play a really important role there, but that doesn't mean that maybe you might look at some non-traditional ways of getting that kind of information for people who have different kinds of experience. So I think, really thinking through, and again, have not had a chance to look through the really detailed aspects, and especially not helped by the fact that so many of the boards and commissions have different regulations. So there's a lot to digest there. And again, while you want to bring new perspectives, you also want to respect the institutional knowledge that exists there and not, change things in a way that you upset the apple cart in a way you had unintended consequences, right? If there's one thing I learned working in the federal government, right? There's a lot of good intentions that end up in unintended consequences. So, again, definitely, an openness and willingness to understand different perspectives and what that may mean in terms of what people bring in terms of experience and the references that they may bring, but don't want to, kind of throw out the baby with the bathwater in terms of what we might need to hear from folks. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Hi, Tracy Schoenberg from Sherrill. I'm a former councilwoman. I currently do government relations. A lot of folks ask me about the portal, and is that currently the best way to share? I'll just keep going.
Yeah. I can hear you.
The best route, and will the portal remain up after she's inaugurated? And if not, what is the best path to express interest in serving the board, commission, or in any other task for the administration?
Yeah, so I think there's, just because of the period we're in right now, the transition, there's kind of probably more than one answer to that. 100% encourage everybody who's interested in serving in the administration or, in the board and commission to go to the portal on the GovElect website. For sure, we are doing, we have an army of people who are going through that. It is actually the best way to track folks coming in. So I've had people think like they're, the best thing to do is to email me. I actually literally had my dog walker reach out to me and say, a friend of mine gave me her resume for you. I'm going to put it in your mailbox, right? Not how I would recommend. I'm sure that felt like a really good way. But as you can imagine, I'm so busy right now. I keep saying to people, like, the best way for your information to not get where it needs to go is to give it directly to me, actually. So I've been saying, going through the portal so that everything is tracked properly is really, the best piece. But I would also encourage folks I don't want to undermine at all the current governor's, portal that they have as well. All that information will get passed along to us. And at some point, there will be a transfer where our transition site will go away, and we'll be working, fully off our own site for the governor's office as well. And I'm not a tech person, so I can't tell you exactly what that's going to look like, but we will be planning forward and making sure that happens as smoothly as possible and in a way that we don't lose information from people.
I just want to say on behalf of the Center and of the Women's Political Caucus, thank you so much, Kelly, for being here. We really appreciate your commitment to this and Governor-elect Sherrill's commitment to this issue. And we know you're extraordinarily busy and you took the time to be here on a freezing cold Saturday morning. So we're really grateful to you. Thank you so much.